And so for me, I'm in practice still. I like to do the conversion part. I like to get in there, do a report, and collect money because I like this art of communication. That's what I want to share with you today is this art of communication, or what I call the arc of conversion. Hey, so the title of this training is How to Close Big Plans. But realistically speaking, for all of us, it's very much context to what we believe is a big plan. So there are those out there that would feel like asking for $2,000 is a lot of money. Then I've got on the higher end in some of my clinics and for some of my regenerative medicine clients where you're asking for north of $20,000. And then that's a big plan. So it's all relevant to where you are. And I can tell you that when I started in chiropractic, there was a lot of giving it away, that was the culture that was out there in the profession. We're coming off the Mercedes 80s. I opened up in the 90s. So in the 80s, people owed like nothing out of pocket. At one point, apparently it was before my time, but in the early mid 80s, you didn't ask for deductibles, you didn't ask for co-payments. You just saw the people for free, and you got these big insurance checks that gave you 80% of everything and anything you build. Those must have been nice days. And when you met those kind of chiropractors, they all were in Rolls Royces and Mercedes and BMWs, and they seemed to be very happy, doing very little and getting a lot of money from insurance companies. Unfortunately, that day ended, and we had to get good at actually building value for chiropractic and people being willing to pay cash. And to this day, now, 40 years later, most people still struggle. Staff struggles, doctors struggle, some people worse than others. So I want to talk about the arc of conversion. It's all really about communication. And if you understand people, and if you really think through where they're at when they come in to see you in terms of their value for your care in chiropractic, and also just what they expect to pay, their financial expectation. So those of you who are out there who just believe the reason people don't start is because some issue with their insurance, or they can't afford it, or it's the economy. I hear that a lot these days. It's the economy. For those of you who believe that, it's really not true. While you might hear that from people, that they'll tell you it's the economy, or they expected you to take their insurance, or they just weren't willing because they said they didn't have the money to spend to do your care plan. The reality, it's all communication, because that same patient walks into other establishments that do different types of business or care, or to other chiropractors, and through communication, they're willing to pay. And so for me, I'm in practice still, I like to do the conversion part. I like to get in there, do a report, and collect money because I like this art of communication. That's what I want to share with you today is this art of communication, or what I call the arc of conversion. So the idea of an arc, or this bridge, is that here's where they come in, and we've got to take them through a process so that on the other side of this arc or bridge, they say yes to your plan, regardless of how much it costs, regardless of their insurance. Who cares who the president is or how the economy is doing? They're ready to pay. So first of all, there's a few principles you have to understand. So I'm just going to rattle off these principles. First of all, the concept here is problem-focused care. The issue you're going to have is if they don't really understand they have a real problem, why invest time and money? Certainly invest outside what I would expect the insurance to cover. So they got to really understand they have a problem. And you got to realize they don't think they have a problem. They come see you. So something hurts. It could even hurt really bad. Pain could be shooting down their leg, migraine headaches, neck pain, whatever it is, numbness in my hand. It could be really bad, or even some physiological condition. They don't necessarily think they've got a big problem. So they're like, yeah, I've got this, numbness on my arm. It feels like if you just cracked it right here, it would go away. They're really generally relegating chiropractic down to something very similar to massage or acupuncture, something where you're going to work with muscles or tissues for this kind of minor thing. I expect it to be covered, and you'll solve this or make it feel better. They've got this down to something small. So we've got to make sure it's something big. They realize there's a problem. Like I understand if I've been told I've taken an MRI, I've got this ruptured disc, and the medical doctor tells me I'm going to die or become paralyzed or never be able to have sex again. Then I go, I've got a problem. Let's do some surgery. Okay, co-payments are $25,000. I got rehab that costs more money, drugs the rest of my life. Let's do it. I've got a problem. They're not like, well, I mean, are you sure it's 25,000 out of pocket? I thought I had better coverage than that. They're just ready to do it because they value it. There's an urgency because they know they have a problem. They come to see you, and it's just, I've had people with awful conditions come in. Like, for example, we've done like an inexpensive Facebook campaign. They come in with awful conditions, serious problems that are ruining their life. They're just like, yeah, listen, here's my $29. I get an x-ray and adjustment, and I'm out of here. And so again, my arc has to be to take them from there, $29 for not much of a problem, to coming out on the other side where they value it. They realize there is a problem and they're ready to invest, or what we call problem focused care. The next thing is really contrast. The only reason they think you're expensive is because they're contrasting it to their expectation. I was just working with a doctor. I actually listened to their audio of the report, and the person had come from the joint. So they were paying whatever the joint charges these days, like $79 a month. $79 a month is pretty typical of the joint. And then this office does a full corrective plan with regen. So their care plan is $10,000. So without ever addressing the difference, the guy just takes a person who values chiropractic at $79 a month and says, our plan's $10,000. That's crazy. Like, as far as the patient's concerned, this is highway robbery. You are scamming me. You are ripping me off. You are a criminal. This is criminal behavior in their mind, not because it is, but because of how it's communicated. There's a way to communicate the exact same thing and have them not think it's criminal behavior, but instead believe they're getting a deal, that $10,000 is a steal for the kind of problem I have, what it could cost or would cost if I let it go and went the medical route. And it's only $10,000. So again, we can flip the communication and make it seem cheap instead of something that you should go to prison for. So contrast is really important, which is involved in setting the anchor number. So if the anchor number is lower than your fee, you're always in a lot of trouble, to the point where you could even be considered ripping them off in their mind. So at $79 a month, that's low, and I'm at 10,000. That means my fee is way beyond their anchor number of 79. I need to get the anchor number above 10,000 if that 10,000 is going to seem reasonable, or again, even inexpensive. One of the things, and arguably any one of these is really the killer to conversion as we go through this arc of a process here. But I believe that at the forefront of our problem is what we call the normalcy bias. And I ran across this as an example when I was working with people who had neuropathy. So we were doing a lot of neuropathy marketing, and people would come in, and I had never been involved with something like this where they're losing toes, they're cutting off toes, they're amputating entire feet off of people's bodies. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of a layup. Like, we've shown them how we could solve this. We've even done a test treatment so they could see that it's going to work. It seemed like it was going to be a layup. See me, don't lose your foot. And yet a number of those people said no. And the reason they gave is that, you know what, I think I'm going to be okay. I think I'm fine. And in fact, I remember in one instance, this guy was in really rough shape. He hadn't slept in years because at night his feet would ball up into a fist. That's how bad the neuropathy was. It would keep him up all night. So he was driving his wife crazy. And he says to me, I'll be fine. And she says to him, "What, you've ruined all of our lives." Like, she just goes on a rant for 20 minutes. And it still was tough to get him to get started because he thought he'd be fine. And there's something that humans have called a normalcy bias. And what a normalcy bias is the fact that we think we can just make a lateral move, that everything's going to be fine. So regardless of the fact that they're cutting off my toes, they've scheduled me in a month to cut off an entire foot, it's going to work out okay. I can make it. I'm doing fine. Like, I'm making it through this process of never sleeping of taking tons of medication, of absolutely getting rid of everything I love in my life. I no longer do anything I enjoy, but I'm making it. Like that's this normalcy bias that you fight, whether it's as serious as an advanced neuropathy or something as simple as I've got some back pain or headaches or something. This other thing we fight against, and again, you can make any one of these the primary problem, is that people minimize. This is a natural defense mechanism. It's been around since the beginning of mankind. And so it's something that exists. If you've studied psychology, you look at Freud or anybody that's ever evaluated where people are at. And Freud talks about this actually death wish. People have a life wish and a death wish, and these two things battle with each other. That the bottom line is people are minimizing. So even with cancer, I actually just had a good friend of ours who was diagnosed with cancer. And the very first thing they did is say, you know what, I'm going to go ask somebody else. I feel fine. I don't think I have cancer, even though, MRIs, scans, blood tests, everything showed clearly there was cancer. The first thing they did say, I don't think it's a big deal. Maybe I'll just go ask somebody else. So even with something like kind of being an oncologist, they have to deal with the fact that they want to take a very serious and aggressive approach to saving this person's life. They've got to deal with the fact that these people minimize it or even deny it altogether. But it's not that these people are bad people. In fact, our friend is far from that. She's the last person in the world, literally, that I believe deserves cancer. But the bottom line is it's something in our brain that minimizes things. So now I'm walking in without cancer. I'm walking with some back pain. So I'm going to really minimize this, that you as a chiropractor are simply like a massage therapist. I've got a little bit of a muscle thing going on here. I'll come in once and you'll fix it. That's what they're thinking. So as we communicate, we've got to maximize. So a lot of chiropractors that are fearful communicators, soft communicators, they're afraid of confrontation or stepping over the line. The problem is the person's already minimizing it aggressively. You're now soft pedaling it as well. Man, have we got this down to just nothing, of no value, of no consequence. So the fact that people are minimizers is a really big issue for you as you communicate. You got to learn how to effectively maximize. And we're not trying to scare or shock somebody. There's a way to communicate it so that you can effectively maximize the problem and not allow them to minimize the problem. Another big issue is as through this arc of conversion, if you've studied heuristics at all, something remarkable has happened that is something, once again, that's been in people since the dawn of man and womankind, is the fact that they filter. So filtering is important. So back in caveman, cavewoman days, you didn't have to filter a lot. There was a lot of grunts and some pictures written on a cave wall. No internet, no newspapers, no books to read. So I would take in all the information without filtering much of it. I didn't have to filter much because I wasn't getting a lot of information. But as we've gotten into a point where people are getting trillions of messages a minute throughout the day, they've learned inherently to filter out 98% of the messaging. And filters work in one of two ways. One is I just don't hear it at all. So you think I'm educating, communicating to somebody by speaking at them for 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, but it's just going right through them. They're just filtering it out and they're holding on to maybe 2% of it. So that's one problem when it comes to filtering, is that they are actually just not hearing 98%. The other issue is even with that 2% that they do perceive is they now assign their meaning to it. That's the idea of heuristics, which are rules of thumb. You said chiropractor, I thought ambulance chaser. You said chiropractor, I thought man or woman that cracks my back. You said chiropractor, I think personal injury. You said chiropractor, once again, I think it's like a massage therapist or an acupuncturist. So they're heuristically filtering out what you're saying. And so we think that making statements or educating people is helping us. They're shaking their head and not actually picking up on a single thing you're saying, and certainly not grasping the meaning you want or need them to grasp. Final thing I'll say in terms of understanding the communication needs in this arc is the fact that we're never supposed to give the punchline, never give the punchline. And this goes with the last comment I made about statements. So there's something that we should all commit to memory, that statements end communication. When I'm just talking at you, like in fact, one of the problems with this webinar or doing a training like this on video is we're not interacting. So you're not necessarily learning it. Same thing with a patient. If I make a statement, it actually ends the communication. But when I ask a question, it actually creates communication. It forces cognitive thought. And so I can't be asked a question without having to suddenly cognate or actually think about this, put some critical thinking to it in order to give an answer. It actually sparks a part of my brain to turn on. It gets that prefrontal cortex working, realizing, wow, they're going to require me to think and pay attention and get meaning out of the words that they're saying. So I must really make my day one, my reports, going over finances. It's a conversation where I'm asking questions. It's not going to be, again, me just talking, or that won't work. So kind of putting this arc into perspective now, how do I move through this? There's all those little points and principles that I just shared. How do I move through this arc to get them from, again, walking in the front door, thinking I don't have much of a problem, that I don't have to spend much money, and I'll be out of here, to then instead investing several thousand or tens of thousands of dollars and being with this clinic forever, being a lifetime chiropractic patient. How do I win in this arc that we're talking about? So I'm just going to run through these. And then for those of you who are clients, we have documents and further trainings that will get to you. But there's 7 steps to this arc that I want to go through. One, as we mentioned, we have to establish a problem. And I can't move forward until I know we've established that problem. So that, again, comes down to asking questions. Once I've described the fact that, listen, I know this hurts, and that's what you're thinking, that the reason you're here today is something hurts. The reality is you're here today because you got a problem. By the time something hurts, there's a problem. Big difference between being there for a symptom and acknowledging a problem. That, there's whatever it is. There could be disc decay, degeneration of the bone. There could be damage to the cord, damage to the nerves, the physiological impact of that by your heart and lungs and digestive system not working over the last 10 or 15 years that got us to this point, that we've got a problem. So we got to, 1, establish a problem. 2, we've got to set the anchor number. Like I said, we've got to lean on contrast. So number 2 is, should this proceed, this problem, where could this end up? And so we would give examples of people just like them with problems just like theirs who have had surgery. Now, I had one of my associates whose mom ended up with $1.2 million in breast cancer bills and then died. So she let her nervous system, her immune system, her whole body deteriorate to the point where we spent over $1 million and it didn't do anything. Surgery, so back surgery, $50,000, $100,000. Carpal tunnel surgery, $25,000. Trips to the emergency room, getting MRIs of your brain and CAT scans of your brain because of these massive headaches you're having. I had somebody come in for one of these $29 Facebook ads and was very clear. $29, dropped a bag of change, $29 of change on the front desk to make it clear this is all that I'm going to spend. But as I walked her through this series of questions, and we established that when she gets one of these migraine headaches from this neck problem she's been having for years, she can't work. And she's a salesperson that averages over $1,000 a day. I learned that she misses about 12 to 15 days a year with these headaches, which I'm like, okay, so that's $12,000 to $15,000 a year. This has been going on for years. You've lost upwards of, $100,000, $200,000 for this. Are you sure you don't want to fix it? So, again, making sure it's clear, $100,000 versus just what our care plan is, which is going to be a fraction of that. So got to set these anchor numbers, pointing to the fact that I know you've been to chiropractors before, but even though they've been cheaper, the cost of this problem, as we, again, set the anchor number and build our contrast principle, the cost of this problem is ultimately amounting to $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000. And that's this third item, which is comparing to regular chiropractic. It might have been cheaper before, but your problems continue to deteriorate. Your health is worse and worse. And again, where are we headed here in the future? Um, we have to help them understand, as we talked about in terms of normalcy bias, that this is progressing. One of the questions I ask when I'm going over their x-rays is I'll say to them, listen, we took the x-ray Thursday, it's now Monday. So if we actually took an x-ray today, how would that compare to the one we took on Thursday? And I need them to tell me it would be worse. In fact, I know I'm doing a good job when they let me know probably much worse, which is probably not much worse, but they're getting it that I've got an active degenerative condition, so that I can't go home and just say it'll all be fine. I can make it. I'm okay so far, despite how bad it's getting. They realize this is active and progressive, and we've got to do something now, or this can get out of control. But again, I need them to answer those questions, not tell that to them, or we didn't establish communication. So this cost of the future as part of this arc is really important. Where will it be? In one of my clinics where we do regenerative work, so we've got an average care plan of about $11,000. In that clinic, everybody's got Medicare or the VA. So the most common, in fact, it's almost 100% of the people that walk in the door is they say, if it's not covered by the VA or my Medicare, I have no money, I can't do it. So we hear that on day one almost every time. There's a few people down there with some money, but everybody says that for the most part. And so, however, I've got close to 100% conversion rate because, I know how to take people through this arc, and we establish what are you spending per year now as we look at the real cost of this problem in the future. And usually somebody with Medicare, the VA, with a chronic problem, they're spending a couple $1,000s a year. So as we look forward over multiple years, I usually do 10 years, you're looking at $20,000 to $30,000 out of pocket. And is your problem getting better or worse? So it's probably going to be more expensive than that. Plus, what about your life? You're doing less and less, feeling worse and worse, quickly progressing towards a more serious problem, or we could fix it right now. And by the way, for a fraction of that, our plans are only $11,000. As we establish, you're going to spend $20,000, $30,000. So for half or a third, we can fix it. In fact, if you prepay, it's even cheaper. And so I can't tell how many people who just the day before said, I can't do this unless it's free, a day later jumping on the prepay to save themselves $20,000, $30,000 and even save themselves money right now by prepaying. So again, it's all about the communication. It's rarely, if ever, about how much money they have or the economy or their insurance. Finally, it's having laid out the care plan appropriate. So the final part of the arc is how we present the care plan. So we always do it as here's the real cost of care. That if you look at everything we're doing and you look at what the cost of each of those line items are, it's this bigger number. So like even in an $11,000 case, our number is $15,000. And when I say that 15,000, if I've done this right, I stop and I look for their head to shake. Yeah, okay. I have to do it. And that they're ready to pay the 15. And then I give them the good news. Actually, because we want to make this more economical, and this is something that you'll maintain for life. So we want to make sure there's dollars to invest in the future. We have a care plan fee and it's only $11,000. Then I stop again because I want them to be like, oh my gosh, you're some sort of spiritual man. Why are you doing such a great thing for us? And, again, this is the person that said they couldn't afford anything. They're now thanking me for the 11. I said, and here's even better news. What almost everybody does, because it just makes sense, is you just make the one payment. We take another 10% off, and then it's only this number. And so you'd almost be crazy to go, no, I'd rather just pay more. I mean, nobody goes to buy something and ask the more expensive fee. They want to know the cheapest fees. So naturally, almost everybody prepays if this is done properly. So we'll continue to support you with documents and scripts and processes. But if you can understand this arc of conversion and really get a hold of these skills and tools and principles of communication, you're going to start winning every time or most of the time. And like me, you'll enjoy it because you'll enjoy the process of communication. You'll enjoy the challenge of taking people who really need your help, whose lives you'll be able to save, but are trying to stop themselves from being saved. I always tell my staff, people don't want to get well. They're doing everything they can to kill themselves, but it's our communication, our process, this arc of conversion that ultimately saves them. Hopefully this helped. Bless you guys, and remember who you are.